I'm Jaron O'Driscoll, and this is the Alma 230 Project. Put off the natural man, arise from the dust, and fulfill the measure of your creation. Today, we are going to be laying some groundwork for what this podcast is going to cover and be about. We did that a little bit at the end of the last episode, where we went through my backstory and I told you guys how we got to where we're at here, the evolution of this podcast, and how it's come to what it is today. We're going to dive a little deeper into what I touched on at the end there of that last episode and lay some of that framework for what this podcast is, what you can expect from it, and you can determine whether this is something that is up your alley or not. And what I want to start with here is understanding something that troubles me quite a bit, which is that we have this belief system as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that other faiths don't have. We believe that there's a pre-existence, that we live with our Father in heaven before this life, that our actions in this life, works are important, and what we are doing here is important, and that will determine our, not just salvation, but our exaltation in the next life. We also know and understand that the second coming of Jesus Christ is not that far off. It's coming around the corner. This is the dispensation of the fullness of times. We know what's coming down the pipe, and there's a reason that we came here, out of all the time we could have been here on earth, we came here at this time for a reason. And President Nelson has even said that we chose to come here at this time, that it wasn't just the Lord choosing, but we chose to come during this time. And I think we chose to come during this time because we have special talents, abilities, gifts, and desires to push back on the unique situations and the evil that Satan has infiltrated this world with. He's got his claws and teeth into all kinds of things in society. The modern day Gadianton robbers, the secret combinations are alive and well that the Book of Mormon has warned us about. And those things have certain needs that need to be met to combat them and fight them. And I think that we have, as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, unique skills, talents, abilities, and knowledge to combat those things. And that we were called here for this, that we chose to be here because we are uniquely qualified and capable of fighting back and pushing back on those things. The problem I see is that I don't think a lot of people understand that, and we just go to this attitude of we just go to church on Sunday, we fulfill our calling, we do our ministering, our home ministering, and as long as we're doing those things, we're doing everything we need to, and we're going to be fine just checking off these basic check boxes, and it tends to revolve all around what we do on Sunday. But there's so much more, not only that we're capable of, but that we're called to do, I feel. And we need to figure out what that thing is that we're good at and that we're supposed to be doing here on earth. The family is really under attack right now. And men are being feminized by society and the media, our education system. Women are being hypermasculinized, men are being hyperfeminized. Children are being taught that women can be men, men can be women. They can choose their gender, that it's just a cultural and societal construct, and that they can blur the lines between everything that is concrete and allows a family to come together with a mother and a father and raise children. And the public education system and our colleges are very much to blame for this. And all of this, honestly, satanic doctrine is being taught there to our kids, to the point where 70 to 80%, depending on the studies that you look at, of our kids in our faith, just in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, 70 to 80% of them are leaving the faith after they leave the home. Now, a lot of that has to do with things like church history and things like how the gospel squares with science, things like evolution and trying to meld evolution with the scriptures. And all of these things are really confusing our kids, and they're not only learning to doubt their faith, but then they're also being taught through these bitterness study classes to hate themselves and the family and all of society, and to be not only self-loathing, but to also hate all the things that the Lord put in our lives through our families to raise us, bring us up, and give us the best opportunity to come back to Him. Just huge push for, and has been for a very long time, for women to go into the workforce, and that women don't need men, that they can do everything that a man can do. And so they're choosing not to have a husband in the home. And even sometimes they have children on their own without having a man around, and they get sent and raised by the school system, not understanding how dangerous that is for a father to be absent from the home and not have that influence and presence in that child's life. And on the flip side of that, men are starting to go, oh, this is crazy. Marriage is just going to, end up with me getting attached to a child that I love and having them taken away from me and half of my belongings taken away from me. And men are becoming more and more hesitant about getting married and actually starting families in the first place. So this is all working perfectly in Satan's favor. Everything he's working at to stop families from even coming together in the first place is working. And a big problem with that, with men being over feminized, is they become very weak. I watched a really interesting video of this social experiment that was done somewhere in the city. I'm not sure where it was. It was in a very populated area. But this person was going in the same spot over and over down the street, grabbing a child from behind, putting his other hand over their mouth, and running off down a dark alley with them. And person after person of them doing this just looked, watched, and just kept walking and refused to get involved. And it was so sickening and disheartening to me how many men were avoiding this. And finally, one woman saw what happened and ran down the alley after the man, trying to see what they could do to help. But so many people passed by because men today are so afraid to stand up for what is right because they're afraid they're going to be called a bigot or a racist, homophobe, whatever, if they step in and put their nose or their toe into business that they shouldn't be putting it. And media is a huge offender in pushing these kind of values forward, along with public education and our colleges. Kids are learning all of these things from a younger and younger age and having it reinforced throughout their life. And we as a society have been taught that it's okay for us to farm out all of these things, for our kids' education, and taking all this responsibility, removing it from ourselves and putting it in the hands of the state. And we think that they're going to turn out and have a great life, and that they have to do that to learn the things they need to learn to be successful in today's society and get the right job and have the right qualifications and the right prestige, and that's what's going to make them happy. And so we ship them off to these schools, encourage them to go to college and get into serious amounts of debt where they, go and learn bitterness studies and how to hate their parents and how to hate God. We are throwing our personal responsibility to the wind here with reckless abandon while we send our kids to be taught by Caesar, and we're completely surprised when they come back Romans. We don't want to talk about anything in church that the Book of Mormon says about secret combinations, even though it is heavily taught, and a big warning that the Book of Mormon gives us is about the things that are going to be happening in the last days right now through modern day Gadianton robbers and secret combinations. But we don't want to talk about it, even though it's right in our faces every day. We can see what's going on, but nobody will even talk about it. We're too afraid to talk about it. This hyper-feminization of everything, including church, has led to people being afraid to speak up or thinking that it's rude or mean, and that we need to have this ethic of niceness, which we think is more important than the truth. This is something that Greg Madson's talked about on Quick Media that I really like. It's that we don't have a doctrine of niceness. That is not a moral ethic to be nice. Kindness is different, and it is not kind to be lying to people or to not be telling the truth or to be holding back because we're afraid that it might hurt someone else's feelings. Now, there are a lot of people out there that are talking about a lot of these things, and they're called conspiracy theorists, and they're shunned and poo-pooed by mainstream media as whack jobs, even though, the last 4 years, the score is, 16-0 conspiracy theorists. But there are people out there talking about these things, but I don't see a lot of it from members of our church. And again, I think it's that doctrine of niceness that has played a very heavy hand in our church culture today. And we need more of us standing up and talking. We need more modern day Abinadis. Abinadi had no idea what was going to happen. I don't think he knew what was going to happen from him going to King Noah and speaking the truth. Nobody else was there. Nobody was there to back him up. It was just him. And it cost him his life. He didn't know what was going to happen with Alma. He didn't know Alma was going to be inspired and the kind of change that was going to take and put out there into the world. He just knew that it was right to speak up. And I think we need more of that as members of the church. We have a specific knowledge and understanding through the restored gospel that other faiths don't have. And it's directly correlated and pointed at the secret combinations that are happening right now. We need to have more members of our church speaking up about these things. And just like we need more Abinadis, we also need more Almas. We need people that are going to look at this stuff and instead of just reposting all the things that they hear about, are inspired by it and actually go do something. Maybe it doesn't change the whole world, but maybe it changes one person's life. And that might change the future through our children, through the next generation. We might just be the catalyst, and they may be the ones that are going to do the real heavy lifting. We don't need to get so worried about making the big changes. There is something that you are meant to do that you can be a part of in changing things. We need these modern day Abinadis and Almas to prepare the way for the Lord, to prepare the way for Jesus Christ. It's coming around the corner. It's upon us. The prophets have been warning us about it for decades. The scriptures have warned about it. It's going to be coming. It's going to be happening. And we got to decide if we want to be part of the change in that, which side we're going to be standing on, and whether or not we are going to be able to look the Lord in the eye and say that we fulfilled the measure of our creation through the calling we had to be here at this time. Now, the changes that we can make don't necessarily have to be huge. That can maybe we're just called to our family. Maybe it's our spouse and our kids. Again, maybe it's the next generation and we just need to be instilling in them, making the sacrifices, which really aren't sacrifices, they're investments into our children, and making sure that they're passing on the knowledge, the understanding, and the skills that are going to be needed for Christ's return. Maybe there is just one person that you can connect with that needs to hear what you have to say directly to them, and they're the one person like Alma that's going to spark another big change. Maybe we'll never see the fruits of it in our lifetime. We don't know. But that still is a role and a part we have to play. Now, that being said, there are 4 pillars that I think are very important that most things fall under when we're trying to figure out what it is that we're supposed to be doing today and what the Lord has called us to do and what we chose to come here at this time on earth for. And those 4 pillars of preparation are spiritual, physical, mental, and temporal. All right, so let's go through each one of these pillars just a little bit here. Spiritual preparedness. If we don't have a testimony of the Savior Jesus Christ and his atoning sacrifice for us, of the Book of Mormon, of the prophet Joseph Smith, and the restoration of the church, then the other things are kind of for naught. If we don't understand and have that knowledge and faith and testimony that those things are true. Now, that's been heavily under attack by Satan in the last days. We have more people, like I said before, 70 to 80% of the youth leaving the church. And they have these faith crisis questions they can't answer. And the only place they can get information is from anti-Mormon propagandist outlets. It's only been recently that we've had some good sources, that don't shy away from the hard questions and address things from a faithful perspective and give the context that is needed to really understand these topics, to turn every faith crisis question into a faith-building and faith-promoting thing. There is always a faith-promoting answer for every faith crisis question. I'm still finding answers to those things today, to new questions I didn't even know existed. But we've got to get those questions answered and be able to understand them. We can't just keep going on and putting these things up on a shelf, because eventually it's going to break and our testimony is going to go. There's nothing wrong with asking questions that leave you doubting the church. We need to answer those questions and figure out what the real true answer is to them so that we can strengthen our testimonies. So don't be afraid to ask the hard questions, and we're going to ask them here and we're going to answer them. Now, on to the physical. When I'm talking about physical preparedness, I'm talking about being physically prepared to handle the things that are going to be coming in the future. We need to be physically capable of taking care of ourselves and our families. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to shy away from the fact that we need to be a lot better and a lot healthier. I'm included in that. I'm not going to exclude myself from that. We need to be doing things to keep our bodies strong and healthy, to be prepared for everyday events. And not only that, but yeah, there are going to be crazy things happening as the last days move on and on. Things are going to get bad eventually. And we may never have to defend ourselves or protect ourselves, but our kids might, and they need to learn and understand how to protect themselves. So we need to be physically fit. We need to understand the word of wisdom and what that really means and entails. We need to know how to take care of our bodies, that we need to not be sedentary and lazy, that we need to be doing things to push ourselves and challenge ourselves. Because if we're challenged physically for the first time when things go to crap, we're not going to be able to take care of our families and watch over them, let alone being able to help others, which I think is the whole reason why we're here, is to help each other. All right, moving on to mental, which is tied in really close with the physical, because there are so many things that we're putting into our bodies today through our diet, things in our water, chemicals, microplastics, GMOs, the terrible things that are in our food. There are so many things and literally poisons we're putting in our bodies today that are affecting our mental health in a way that most people, I don't even think, have wrapped their head around how bad they're being affected. Their brains are being affected by all the things that we're putting into our bodies. And if we don't have our mental state in a place where we can handle stressful situations, we're going to melt down when things do get bad, because they are going to get bad. They're going to get worse. And if we aren't able to mentally handle those things, we're not, again, going to be capable of keeping our families and others safe. Now, not only have we been putting poisons in our bodies, but also we've had this sedentary lifestyle pushed upon us in Western culture to where we've gotten pretty soft. And we're always looking for convenience. We're always looking for the easy route. We're always looking for the next thing that's going to save us time, save us effort. And it's made us soft. I think we need to be doing more things to push ourselves and make things a little more difficult that we mentally have to challenge ourselves through. When was the last time that you shut your GPS off and just used your brain to get to somewhere you hadn't been before? There's little things like this that we used to have to do before we got this culture of convenience put in our brains. And if we can't start doing little things to challenge ourselves and get our brains exercised in a way to where we can handle stress, it's going to be really ugly when things get bad and we have no capability of dealing with any kind of serious mental stress. Now, there are other stressors in our lives that are bad that come from as a result of that sedentary lifestyle and seeking after all of that, the instant gratification and looking for the easy way, the easy path, the convenience and everything. It's caused these other stressors in our life that we need to cut out as well. People are suffering so bad from anxiety and depression today, and I think most of it has to do with lifestyle. We are not living the way that the Lord built our brains and our bodies to live. We are living so differently from how the Lord intended that it's no wonder that we're dealing with so much anxiety, so much stress, that we have such serious suicide rates among all ages and classes of people. It's like we are putting all of the bad stressors in our life and trying to keep them there because we want the convenience. But then we're avoiding the type of stress and the type of things that will actually help us grow and develop and become stronger. We've got it completely backwards. Okay, now moving on to temporal preparedness. This is not buying a pallet of MREs and a pallet of 5.56 NATO and hunkering down and waiting for Christ to come. I'm so tired of people just saying, I can't wait for the Savior to return. I can't wait for him to come. Well, he's not going to have a place to come to if we don't prepare a place for him to come to. And that's not going to be done with a pallet of MREs and a pallet of ammunition. There's something we need to get straight right now about personal preparedness. And that is that there is a difference between self-reliance and self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency is having a sufficient amount of whatever you need for a certain period of time. This is your food storage, which is important, having water stored and being able to feed yourself and your family when there isn't a place for you to easily access food. That is self-sufficiency, having enough firewood stocked up to keep yourself warm through the winter. That's self-sufficiency. There's a difference between that and self-reliance. Self-sufficiency is built off a consumption model, which is still important. It's not bad, but we have focused, I think, a little too much on that consumption side and not enough on the production side, which is what self-reliance is. We need to have not just a store of food, but a way to produce more of it. We need to know how to garden. We need to have chickens or animals. We need to have other ways that we can produce food, not just a store of stuff to consume. And that also goes into knowledge and skills. We have to have the knowledge and skills of how to acquire more food if we need to. We need to know all these things. It's not just about having a store of food and ammunition. It's about having the ability to acquire and procure what you need when the things you need aren't available. We've got to shift out of this Western consumption mindset and lean into that production side more, because it's not just about us. Yes, we want to be able to take care of ourselves, and yes, we want to be able to take care of our family, but we need to have that community aspect and be able to take care of each other and help each other. People are going to be your greatest asset during the second coming. And we may, again, never see the fruit of our labors. We may just be passing those down to the next generation so that they have them. Maybe they're the ones that need to be taking care of things. But if we don't have those resources and knowledge to pass down and it dies with us, what good is it? Now, a lot of people are going to look at all this and say, man, I'm going to have to sacrifice a lot of things in my life to be able to do all these things and to focus on preparing my family, let alone preparing others for the second coming of Christ. There's so many things that I'd have to do. Well, that's the thing. It's not a sacrifice. This is something I learned from Andy Frisella recently. We keep talking about all these sacrifices that we have to make to be successful in whatever we're pursuing, but it's not a sacrifice. It's an investment. When we have all these things prepared and we've done the work up front and everybody else that we're looking at is unprepared, we're there and we're able to help them. And we're able to say, look, I'm glad that we did this. This was an investment in us to help our family and help others. That's not a sacrifice. It's an investment. You're investing your time and your energy instead of into paying for that RV or that side-by-side or that bigger house or staying in a certain area. You are investing your time and energy into being able to do something that is going to benefit you and your family in the long run. You know, we decided to homeschool a long, long time ago. And my wife, ever since, after our first 2 years of marriage, she's been a stay-at-home mom. And that's always been really important to us. And I know how hard it is today to be able to make a living on a single income, especially if you're not making, $100,000 a year or more. And even there, in some areas, especially in the Rocky Mountain West, it's still really hard, even when you've got two parents working and sending them to school so that you can. And we really didn't have a whole lot of choice. I feel we were called to where we went to and pushed in that direction. But we've recently moved to the South because it is way too expensive in the Rocky Mountain West for us to keep my wife home, to homeschool the kids, and do all these things that we're talking about and that we need to do. But that wasn't a sacrifice that I made. That was an investment I made because I plan and intend to be self-reliant and self-sufficient in all these 4 pillars for my family and myself, and so that we can help other people. Now, we've never had super fancy stuff, never been able to pay for fancy vacations or do anything crazy like that. We've never owned super nice toys. We never had RVs and side-by-sides. We never had anything nice like that. But it's been worth it to see my son, when he was 7, 8 years old, make $1,000 in a couple months at a farmer's market with his business that he came up with. Or to watch my kids' brains work as they're trying to be young entrepreneurs and have these opportunities to do things that honestly they wouldn't have and might even be squashed if I sent them to public school. To watch them learn and grow in the knowledge of the gospel and retain things as we teach them here at home, teaching them about the world and the important things that aren't taught by the public education system, seeing how different they are when they interact with other people and other kids. It's been very humbling, and it's been worth everything that we've sacrificed to be able to see that and have that and to be fulfilled. You see, we have this mistaken understanding of what joy is, and the scripture said that we're here to have joy, that men are here to have joy. I think we've lost the understanding and meaning of what joy is. What joy and happiness really is, and what I think it really meant before we switched those terms, is fulfillment. We're always chasing the joy and the happiness, but it's not long lasting the way that the world gives it to us. It's fulfillment. What is it that's fulfilling? Even though it's stressful and it can be hard, at the end of the day, do we feel fulfilled? You can be happy and joyful without being fulfilled. I don't think you can be fulfilled without being happy or joyful. And this comes back around to what I said at the beginning of the show for our introduction. Put off the natural man, and that is letting go of all these things that we're trying to do to have convenience in our life, or try to give our kids the things that we didn't have, and trying to give them the fancy vacations and all these things that it's great to have experiences together. We're very big on experiences in our home, but we don't need to be spending the money we do and have to have the jobs, the dual jobs, and the income that is required to support that lifestyle. We need to put off the natural man that's telling us that we're fine just the way we are. That goes directly against the eternal progression principle. We need to constantly be understanding that we're always falling short, that we can do better and need to be trying harder to be getting physically stronger, mentally stronger, better prepared in every way. Not just going along and doing the bare minimum of going to church and doing our callings like that. As long as we do that, then we're just going to be blessed and we'll be fine. Which goes to the second thing I've said there, which is arise from the dust, which is what Lehi was telling his sons before he died, to arise from the dust and be men. We need to stop being sedentary and just doing the bare minimum and do what we can to do our best, be better every day, not just go through the motions. We need to have an internal perspective in mind, like the prophet said, think eternal, and realize that this world, this mortal existence, is a proving ground, a training ground for gods, future gods. And we need to take that seriously. In doing those things, I think we can truly fulfill the measure of our creation. And that brings us to the Alma 230 project. Why Alma 230 project? I'm not going to read that whole verse or the whole chapter, but I recommend you go and read Alma chapter 2 and understand what's going on in that chapter. In verse 30 is the culmination of what's happened with wicked King Amlici and Alma. Wicked King Amlici has taken a large portion of the Nephites away, drawn them away because they want to have a king. The people voted no. Amlici took his followers and they broke off, joined with the Lamanites to come back and try and kill and subject the rest of the Nephites. Now, as the battle's raging on, Alma starts contending with Amlici. Now, as the battle comes to a head, Alma and Amlici are contending with each other. And Alma cries out to the Lord in prayer during battle and says, Lord, preserve my life that I may be an instrument in thy hands. And that is the crux of what this podcast is about. How can we be an instrument in God's hands? How can we be an instrument in his hands? How are we prepared to be an instrument in his hands? How did we choose to be an instrument in his hands when we decided to come to this earth at this time with our special gifts, abilities, and talents? What is it we're supposed to be fighting back on? What is it that we specifically have that is so unique to fight back on what Satan has been pushing in our society today, to push back against the lies, the evil, and the works of darkness that Satan has got his teeth and claws into? And we're going to be figuring that out on this show. How can we prepare spiritually, physically, mentally, temporally? We'll be bringing guests on to talk about how they are doing what they've been called to do, how they've been prompted to be pushing back on what's happening in society today, the difference that they are trying to make and that they have been called to make. And try to inspire you guys to figure out what it is that you're meant to be doing. How can you be pushing back and fighting back? And what were you made to be pushing back and fighting back on in the last days at this time? In this time where Satan has such a chokehold on our society, there are ways that you were meant to come here and push back on that and fight against it. And I hope that between me and the other people we have on here and the discussions that we have, that we can figure out what those are and figure out how we can be an instrument in God's hands in the last days. And that's what we'll start to dive into in the next episode. That's it for this one, though. Until the next one, guys, remember to subscribe through audio if you're listening on a podcast, and also subscribe on YouTube if you're watching there. And until the next time, remember to be an instrument in God's hands.